Well, welcome to the Transgender Women of Color panel, the first night of Gender Spectrum Week. Gender Spectrum Week is a 6-day event consisting of 6 panels designed to bring focus to various trans issues beginning tonight and ending on the Transgender Day of Visibility, which is March 31st. Please join me in welcoming our speakers this evening, beginning with Katharine Alice Luck. Katharine is a trans woman who is a full-time transgender rights advocate. She is the Vice President of Strive and a minister ordained through the Fire Dance Church of Wicca in Milton, Florida. She has planned and hosted the Transgender Day of Remembrance in Pensacola since 2013 and vocally advocates for increased public awareness regarding violence against the transgender community, particularly transgender women of color. Delia Melody, next, is an independent musician and YouTube personality who has been called the loudest trans rights advocate in Northwest Florida. She serves as the volunteer coordinator for Strive and the social media director for the Florida Transgender Alliance, as well as writing for the Queer Voices and Women's columns in the Huffington Post. And our program includes the website, which I'm not going to read all the way out. Then we have, of course, Indigo Lett. Indigo is a 30-year-old non-binary transgender person who identifies as demigender and uses she/her pronouns. She graduated from UWF in International Studies, but would like to get her master's in social work to provide assistance to those like her in the community. A member of Strive, she does what she can do to help her community by providing another voice to combat the issues that for so long hinder those who just want to live with the authenticity they desire. Alrighty. I'm going to go ahead and start off with a few questions just to get things rolling. Let me start off by asking each of you, starting with Katharine, what makes this panel important to you personally?
Well, obviously, it's an issue that directly affects me as a transgender woman of color, but the transgender community faces greater violence than any other demographic, with a chance of being a victim of homicide of roughly 1 in 12. And most of those are trans women of color, especially black transgender women. The media does not pay any attention to us. No one hears us. We are attacked on the streets. We are refused jobs. We are refused housing. And all of this is completely legal. No one cares. And every year, I get to read the names of the women who have been murdered because society thinks that it's okay for us to be ignored, discriminated against, and killed. And I want to stop that.
Katharine, first of all, you do a really good job of covering, the reasons why we're doing this. It's especially important to me, focusing on the violence, just because of how much of it I personally experienced, how much it could just completely turn my life upside down in a heartbeat. And coming to realize after meeting so many other transgender women, especially other transgender women of color in the community, that what I went through was pretty normal. That, people lose everything just coming out as transgender women, and then when you're a transgender woman of color, you have to deal with that intersection of being transgender, which you have to deal with transphobia, dealing with being a woman, which you have to deal with the misogyny even before you come out in a lot of cases, because people can just, gender is a lot of times I feel tangible in some ways. It's like my whole life people have known to some degree that it's like if they couldn't peg me as a woman, it was at least, well, you could tell that they didn't think of me or see me as a man, and so I was treated with misogyny. And then, of course, that becomes even more so once you come out. You lose any semblance of any male privilege you had before. When you're a person of color, on top of that, you have to deal with racism for whatever race you are, if you're not white, essentially, in this country. It becomes so overwhelming that you just, wherever you go, unfortunately, the only way, for me personally, that I've learned to deal with it, and I feel like a lot of us learn to deal with it, is just to kind of expect it and be prepared for it everywhere we go. We already have to expect that we're going to be treated poorly. We already have to be prepared to face violence. I've noticed that I've always had poor posture all my life. Part of that changed for looks. Part of it changed definitely because of the fact that I started to realize that in order to get by and feel safe, I needed to exude a posture of confidence that would basically kind of dare people to do anything to me, otherwise they would. And when these things happen with us, you know, if I were a white transgender woman, it would be pretty easy for me to deduce exactly what the reason is that I'm being discriminated against, exactly what the reason is that I'm being targeted with violence. As soon as I'm a transgender woman of color, I don't know anymore. It could be because I'm Latina, it could be because I'm a woman, it could be because I'm transgender specifically. More likely it's a mix of all three, because when you deal with these different kinds of oppressions, it's not even just like stacking one on top of the other. It gets so much more complicated than that. You deal with things as a transgender woman of color that no person of color who is not both transgender and a woman would deal with, that no transgender person who is not also a woman and of color would deal with, etc. So, and you just think about how many people this is, and the fact that it's so many lives is ridiculous. Like Katharine said, 1 in 12, which is a number actually backed up by GLAAD and the HRC. And it's just shocking. It's one of those numbers that you don't want to believe it, but you have to because it's the fact. And it's frightening. I want to see the day when that ends, and that only happens with us educating people.
Yeah, so I guess to piggyback off of what they were saying, so I want to say last year, I want to say it was like 25 in America, trans people that got killed, and 17 of those were black trans people, and 16 of those were black trans women, one being gender fluid. I think this year alone has been 7. I think out of those 5 were black trans people, and then 4 were black trans women, one being gender fluid. So, you know, for me, you know, as a black trans person, it's, you know, I smile, I laugh, and I joke, you know, but, you know, in the back of my mind, I, you know, have the thought process of, you know, if I'm ever caught in a situation, or if I'm ever in you know, some dangerous situation because of my race, or because I'm a woman, or trans, you know, just the underlying fear of all that, and then having to just, you know, kind of, I think like Delia was saying, like, you know, kind of be more confident in yourself and be more, and smile, you know, and just have a brave face, and so you can, you know, just continue to push on every day. So discussions like this for me are very important because it outlines the marginalized of the marginalized of the marginal, you know, so it breaks it down further than what maybe a cis person would think of, as in like what would affect a trans person. Maybe they think of just a white trans person and what they go through, but when you add on to that race and gender, it really plays into, and then on top of that, your own community and what you do within that. So it really hits home, like, you know, what you have to deal with on a daily basis. And so, like, for me, I would, you know, I would like to be more free and expressive in my dress and my clothing and stuff like that. I mean, even though I like what I'm wearing on now, and I don't mind it, but for me, I would like to be more expressive, but I always hold myself back a lot of times because I feel like if I do express more, what would happen? You know, like who would say what, you know? And like at work, I try to, you know, I'm starting to take hormones now, but I hadn't told anybody, so now I'm kind of like under the radar, you know, literally. And, you know, a lot of people at work are not, it's what's funny actually is the fact that when you know you're going on the right path somewhere, people start talking about the thing that you're doing almost in a way, you know, in an indirect way. So, you know, especially when Caitlyn Jenner came out, you kind of have to stand up for yourself, but at the same time not go so far as into question, for them to question who, you know, you are. And so you have this like, you know, back and forth of trying to be who you are, but at the same time trying to protect yourself from people who could discriminate against you. And so I think conversations like this really, help, people who are watching this or people who are out here to really understand the thought process and the things that trans people of color go through every day.
What are some of the positive experiences you've had as a trans woman of color, and some of the negative experiences?
Positives is doing this, doing the vagina monologues, being with the feminist society, kind of like we all came together, forces combined, it's kind of cool. Me being an only child, it's really like when I have friends, I take them more seriously than if maybe somebody else would. So I feel like everybody in here are like sisters and brothers or non-binary, whatever, Siblings. There you go, my bad, there you go. I'm non-binary, why am I not? Okay, so. Internal, okay. No, but, so, siblings, so I take that. And so, starting hormones and having a community around me that, that I know that if I do get in trouble, if I do get in situations I can come to for help, especially Strive. For me, that's really the big positive, is to know that every day I go to work or every day that I try to better my life to get to where I want to be, I know that there's people that if I were to stumble or were to fall, or were to have a bad situation happen, I know that I have people there to help me. I think the negatives is just like I said earlier, the underlying fear of just knowing that you go on Facebook every day or every other day or every week or something like that, and you see another trans woman die, and it's another black one, and then it's another one, and then it's another one, and then you're sitting there trying to hope that your turn's not next, but at the same time, you try to just hope that you could be just a person who, I guess, can, help. I guess another negative is just the community around me. Obviously, there's people in my community, the black community, that are very accepting and accepting, but there's also, I feel like, with the older generation, what's sad about it, I feel like, is they're just starting to get used to gay people and lesbian people. Like, trans people is a whole nother level of understanding. They're black gay men and lesbians are still getting, discriminated against at home and at school and all that. So in my community, to be honest, I just feel like there's a long way to go. And it's just saddening that, you look at the history of our people, and there's so much strife and fight that we went through, just to discriminate against within our own. It's still saddening to me on that end. But I know, Black Lives Matter was created by two queer women and another cisgender woman, but I hope that groups like that will educate those who are still, still have their doubts or still have, issues with the LGBTQIA community, and just hopefully that negativity as our generation gets older, it starts to dissipate from the older generation that's obviously probably going to pass away because of old age. But yeah, that's just that underlying fear, just the negativity from that. So I think that's the positive negative.
I can agree that working with the Feminist Society was one of the biggest positive things, especially in my life and my recent memory. They were really wonderful, and it was really good. They were really, really inclusive, I felt, as far as bringing us in, not only having us doing the trans monologue, but also having each of us on backup as an understudy for one of the main monologues, which I actually ended up getting to do, which was really exciting. When I say that, it's funny because it's literally something that just happened this year, and I say it's one of the most positive experiences I've had as a transgender woman of color in my life. And this last 15 months for me, it kind of leads me unfortunately into what is the negative portion of it, because this last 15 months for me essentially is my life. in a lot of ways. I feel like anyone who is here knows to at least some extent that I was subject to an outrageously violent and traumatic event shortly after coming out. I experienced homelessness and I experienced violence at the hands of my family. I experienced slandering and libel that cost me my relationships with everyone I knew, short of 2 people, which was, probably people who would have turned out to be transphobic anyway in a subtle way, because most cis people are, but people who were not even, abandoning me and leaving out of my life because of me being trans, but because of those indirect impacts. All of the violence is multiplied when you're a transgender person of color. For many different reasons, it gets so complex. It's tied up in classism, it's tied up in really subtle racism, it's tied up in absolutely everything. And so, especially in my case, just people were so willing to believe anything negative about me. They start to look at you after you come out as though you're just this person that they didn't know anymore. They see you as a totally different person who killed the old person, and it makes it so much easier for them to do these horrible things to you. But what that's left me with, because I don't want to get too involved or in depth in that, is just the fact that I do suffer traumatic dissociation, where I can't always remember details of anything in my life before 15 years from now. 15 months ago? What did I say?
You said
Years ago.
Years from now. That's really okay. Thank you for catching me. From anything longer than 15 months ago, so essentially the first 27 years of my life is a collection of really vague ideas and memories where I can remember people's names and basically who they were, but like any semblance of anything that you would normally be able to recall in detail is just not there. I can sometimes not even remember what year something happened, who I was with, where I was living, things like that. So that's obviously, it's kind of the biggest negative, but it's in its own way obviously sort of positive too, just because, well, the dissociation is just because of the fact that I don't know how I'd get by if there wasn't that disconnect, but it would have been better if it didn't have to happen. I've gotten this sort of attitude, I don't know, people tell me I'm brave all of the time. I never quite believe it because I'm always on the inside kind of terrified, but I feel like, I don't know, maybe there's a difference there, but I do my best to just kind of project this air that I'm not going to take anyone's crap.
That's what bravery is.
Is that
you're not afraid.
Okay? So I do my best to put on this air that I'm not going to take anyone's crap, and I've not really had to deal with all that many situations, but I feel like it honestly, and I'm ashamed to say this, is because to some extent I do kind of play it safe. I go out to do the things I need to do. I go out to do the things I really want to do, and when I go out to do them, I go to places which I generally know of as safe spaces because I've been there before. I usually have at least one, if not more, cis allies and other trans people with me when I'm going out to do these things, and so I feel like that, honestly, more than anything else, has protected me a lot from a lot of the more negative experiences I could have, which I feel is only natural. I feel like it's really just a response to exactly how traumatic the events were that happened to me right after I came out, is that just I don't really always, I don't want to take as many risks as I could, which at the end of the day I just have to accept that the risks are there, and I do my best to be prepared for them, trying to work with getting a music career going, working with a YouTube career that is getting, to be more and more of an actual legitimate thing. It's just going to be unavoidable that I am going to face more violence. I'm going to face more violence on many different levels as that goes places. And I feel like that, like asking specifically whether or not there's a negative, what negative and positive impacts there have been in your life to a group of transgender women is really poignant in the fact that, to me, it feels like every positive becomes a negative somehow in its own way, and every negative becomes a positive somehow in its own way. Everything's just so wrapped up, and it shouldn't have to to be that way. You know, you should be able to draw some positivity from a negative experience, but you shouldn't have to live in a society where every positive thing, you know, like the idea of somehow if my wildest dreams came true and I was like one of those names like Laverne or Janet that everyone knew, I'm terrified of that the possibility that it's like, how would I deal with all of everything that would come with that recognition, all of the hatred that I would have to see, the death threats I would end up receiving, you know, the worrying about whether or not someone from my previous life would show up somewhere and try to commit violence against me at some kind of show or panel like this or something. I still consider myself anyway to be pretty under the radar right now, and I feel like there's a safety in that, but I don't want to stay here. And so, and I mean, I have to face it out, like admitting it, but Katharine frequently points it out to me, and she's right that it's really not honestly in my hands to a complete extent anymore, whether or not I stay under the radar. That's going to change. And no one should have to, people should be able to look at that as a positive. Everyone in that position is going to have some concerns, but no one should have to worry so much about, you know, how much longer. I'm already 2 years past the average life expectancy of a transgender woman of color, and I shouldn't have to wonder how many more of those I'm going to get. But I do, every day. It keeps me up at night, especially, you know, in the current political environment, in this election year where it seems like people who do hate us are going to such extremes, you know, things that just happened in North Carolina. No one should have to live like that, but we do.
Doing this kind of work, the activism and advocacy that I do, working with Strive, with the Feminist Society, Lambda Coalition, MCC, and seeing the difference that makes, even if it only makes a difference for one person at a time, is definitely the greatest joy in my life. My connection with the transgender community, the queer community, and every other community that intersects with has given me a sense of purpose in my life that I didn't have until a few years ago. Seeing something in the world that needed to be changed and seeing that I had an opportunity to help make that happen gave me a reason to be here. This community has given me a sense of family that is closer than anything that I otherwise would have had. Being transgender has given me community and connection to other people that I wouldn't have had. But there are always the negatives, like Delia said, because the reason that the community is so close is because it's so small and because of the violence and the discrimination that we face. We have to be close because we don't have anybody else. We have the people who are in the room for events like this are it for us. I've always faced a little bit of discrimination. Before I came out, people usually clocked me as queer, just most people, and I caught a lot of discrimination for that, even when I was a kid, but it was not nearly to the level that it's been since I started actually presenting as a woman. Before I started transitioning, I faced things like, it was fairly routine that somebody would come up to me, random strangers, people that I'd known for a little while, would just walk up to me and ask questions like, "What are you?" And they were talking about race, and I knew that's what they were talking about, and a little insensitive, they didn't know any better because nobody thought it was necessary to tell them that that's not a question that was acceptable to ask. They couldn't figure out what I was. People think Native American, people think Middle Eastern. Every once in a while somebody actually figures out that I'm Greek, and they think that my race is their business. And I would blow it off because it wasn't a big deal. Most of the time I didn't get a whole lot more than that, especially when I was a kid, because everybody knew my parents and nobody was going to actually mess with me. And then I moved, and I came out and I started transitioning, and it got so much worse. And now I still get asked the same question. Only now, most of the time, they mean, what kind of freak are you? Because they don't acknowledge that I'm a woman, but here I am in a dress. So they say, what are you? And every once in a while, they're still talking about race. And that is no longer just harmless ignorance. That's no longer, they didn't know any better to me. That's, they chose not to know any better. I didn't used to be this angry about things like that. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I blew it off because my parents both had good jobs. We never really went without. There were people in my little podunk community that knew me. I was taken care of. I got my first job because my father called in a couple of favors. I had that kind of upbringing, and I didn't even really understand what facing racism was actually like until after I came out, because that was when I moved. That was when I no longer had those family connections in that little town where everybody watched me grow up. And I got to see, I moved to Oklahoma, and I got to see how people were treated. I was presumed to be Native American because I lived very near the Porch Creek Reservation, and I faced discrimination from that. And as I proceeded with transition and could no longer pretend to be male, it got progressively worse, and it made me more and more angry, and I can no longer look the other way when somebody just doesn't know any better, because I've seen too much of it, and I've seen too much of not knowing any better turning into thinking it's okay to hurt people or to let people get hurt. I've seen too much of most of the world thinks that it's just okay to look the other way. When somebody shoots a black transgender woman in her front yard 3 times because she was transgender, I've seen too many people who just let that go. I've seen too much violence against my community, against people that I know personally, get swept under the table. I have personally been in the room with friends of mine when they spoke to local police about sexual assault and had the police choose not to even investigate because they were transgender, and trans lives don't matter. That's what we live with. That is our reality. And I'm ready to change it.
Hey everyone! Thanks again so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw today, don't forget to hit that like button and share so your friends can enjoy it too. There's more where that came from, including activism and awareness videos, tutorials, you can follow my transition, and even check out some of my music. I also want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters because y'all make this channel possible. If you're not a patron yet and you want to find out how you could get awesome rewards like autographed pictures from my modeling shoots, just go to www.patreon.com/Delia Melody to find out how you can sign up. See you next time and be yourself.